We'll talk a little bit about that, but really we want to talk about some insights about evangelization that we've gleaned from the General Directory for Catechesis. We gave you a handout there, and we think it'll help you in your preaching, in your mission of preaching, and hopefully we can have some discussion around that as well as we go. So please interrupt me at any time, or Faye. My name is Jason Simon. I'm the Executive Director of the Evangelical Catholic. We equip local ministries for evangelization, primarily by sharing with them some of the material that you're going to get here, and then helping them align their ministries very intentionally to lead people through a process of growth. As Pope Francis was quoted in, I think, paragraph 160 of Evangelii Gaudium, talking about attending to people's process of growth. And we think the General Directory for Catechesis tunes us into a good process for growth and evangelization. And we thought it would be helpful to share that with you for your preaching. So, and then Faye and I don't preach as much as I'm sure all of you do in the room. So we'd love to hear your insights and questions as we go, as we walk through this. Faye will share some more practical aspects of preaching that she's noticed in the various churches that she's been a part of at the end. So that's how our time will look. Faye is our Director of Publications, also a senior consultant for us with campus ministry. She has broad experience in campus ministry, must be 20 years now, 15, 20 years, but experience launching new aligned ministries of evangelization on campus, both at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and then at Harvard, very successful implementing what you're going to see here. So she has lots of practical experience, and then my experience is in campus ministry and parish ministry as well. As an organization, we work in both fronts. We work with parishes and campuses, and primarily we help them launch evangelization small groups outside of the church. So at a campus ministry, it would be all the groups would be meeting in dorms or outside of the Newman Center. In a parish, all of the groups would be meeting in neighborhoods, and our goal is to just blanket all the neighborhoods, all the areas of pastoral care that a local ministry covers in small groups of lay-led evangelization small groups. So that's our mission. That's the primary modality of our evangelization in local communities. Of course, when that gets right, everything else starts to come in line with a real system of care and apprenticeship among laity, and the programs of the ministry start to work together. So I think you'll see some of this as we walk through, but maybe we'd start by talking about the word evangelical, since that's the topic on the sign, Evangelical Catholicism, and love to hear maybe some of your thoughts or associations with evangelical, or what you know about evangelical Catholicism. Maybe you've read books on this or articles. Anyone have any associations with that word, or with even the phrase evangelical Catholicism? Yeah.
I've never heard them used together.
Okay.
In fact, I'm part of the Preliminary Home Missionaries Commission on Evangelical and Catholic Relationships.
Oh, yes.
There's kind of a divide.
Yes.
Not necessarily, but so you kind of have to kind of start somewhere. But there's that group, and then here's.
Yeah, so the evangelical Protestants, you're part of a commission, evangelical Protestants on one side and Catholics on the other side. Yeah. What about the word evangelical? What does that mean for you? Did you have something?
Gospel.
The gospel, yes. Thank you, that's the right answer. Well, the first thing we always try to do is recover the word in the Catholic tradition. And I'm sure all of you know that the word goes back way further than 19th century Protestants. And so the word itself, of course, means good newsical, which we put up there. So what is good newsical? What does a good newsical Catholic look like? What does good newsical preaching look like? That's really the point of what we're doing as an organization, trying to recover the word in Catholicism, recover a real awareness. It's on the tip of your tongue, good news, for people, for laity, for pastoral staffs around the country. And so what does good newsical preaching look like, and how would it be transformative? I think a lot of evangelical Protestant preaching is good newsical. They do embody this. A lot of evangelical Protestants do embody good musical lifestyle. I think oftentimes, unfortunately, Catholics have encountered evangelical Protestants who have not been good musical, have been judgmental, have been kind of mean-spirited, have been quick to say they're going to hell. If you died today and Jesus asked you why he should let you into heaven, these kind of questions that a Catholic may answer not quite right according to the formula, and then the assumption is your eternal destiny is in question, and so then they walk away having a bad association with evangelical or evangelization in general. But of course, we all know it need not be so. So it seems like we have good alignment on that phrase and agreement that this is what we want to be as a church. Cardinal Dulles said one time when he was at one of our conferences, all Catholics should be evangelical. And the writings of Vatican II are littered with the phrase and wanting the church to recover this identity. So hopefully we can have a good discussion about how to do that in preaching this morning. Just a little reminder, these are all things that you know. I'll fly through them quickly, but evangelization is the church's essential mission. This is from Evangelii Nuntiandi. I'm sorry I don't have it up there, Pope Paul VI. I think paragraph 14. The church's essential mission is evangelization. It is her grace and vocation, her deepest identity. We oftentimes talk about the essence of a chair and at what point would a chair cease to be a chair, and then talking about evangelization as being as essential to the church as the legs or the back of a chair or the seat of a chair. At what point does a chair become a plank of wood just sitting on the ground that you can sit on? And in the church, when it loses its identity of evangelization, when it ceases to direct all of its energies into this mission, it loses its identity and the fruit starts to wither. And I think we're seeing that in some of the statistics. You may have seen these in the Pew study. There have been lots of statistics like this. But just to run through them, quick review and let our hearts be moved again by the urgency of the mission. 30% of Catholics, raised Catholics, those who are raised Catholics, still attend Mass once a month. So this is the high bar in this study, once a month attending Catholics. And 30% of the people who are raised Catholic continue to attend Mass once a month. You won't see a statistic in the Pew study for weekly Mass. This is where they stop. But then the next level down is 38% still hold to their Catholic identity, but they seldom or never come to Mass. So maybe these are the Easter and Christmas Catholics. 38% who are raised Catholic continue to come to Mass every once in a while, or they don't. But they would still call themselves Catholic. They might still have a crucifix on the wall of their home or things like that, 38%. And then the saddest is nearly a third of those who are raised Catholic no longer consider themselves Catholic at all. I didn't put it up here, but it's interesting to note that out of this 32% that no longer consider themselves Catholic, some of them divide themselves into none, I'm no religion, and some divide themselves into Protestants now. And the statistics are really staggering as to when that decision is made. And those who go out of that group consider themselves no religion, decided they were no religion. 79% of them decided they were no religion by the time they were 24. And then the ones who became Protestant, 66%, 2/3 of them decided they were going to be Protestant by the time they were 24. So these decisions are being made, the vast majority of them, while they're young, shortly after college or during college. And our experience on campus ministries tells us a lot of these students are coming to Newman Centers in the first month, but then they're hearing preaching, I think, from other Protestant groups. They're invited to other large groups around campus. They're going there. They're hearing compelling preaching, relevant preaching, inspiring preaching from Protestant groups, and many of them are leaving the Catholic Church slowly. Over time, they'll still come to Mass on Sunday, but they'll go to the Thursday night large group to hear this preaching. They don't hear the preaching on Sunday, and they're going to hear preaching. When you ask them, why are you going? Community is a big deal for them, but the speakers are powerful. You hear that from them. The speakers are powerful. Or the testimonies of other Catholics or other Christians giving their testimony of overcoming this or that or being a Christian in college are powerful. And so a lot of it hinges on the speaking, the potency of the speaking at these Protestant groups. And it's true, when you go to these groups, when you work in a campus ministry and you visit these groups, it's filled with Catholics. Which I don't mean to say we're in competition with them and we have to start beating them. I mean, I certainly hope Catholic ministries awaken to the good newsical, urgent call of evangelization, that the preaching rises up and improves on college campuses so we don't lose Catholics. They have no need to leave to experience Jesus. They can stay Catholic, but the preaching, I think, has to do a better job grabbing them on campus. In all the other our parishes as well. When I was a youth minister, a DRE and youth minister, some of our best parents left. They left. And they left because they were experiencing difficulty in their marriage. And out of desperation, their neighbor invited them to come to their evangelical church, Protestant church. They went and they were just enveloped in warmth from the community. The preaching hit them. They saw in the scriptures answers that they could live by and walk according to lead them into righteousness, to lead them into forgiveness with one another, into reconciliation. Quickly they were invited on retreats, and pretty soon they're not coming to Mass anymore. These are people who are on the pastoral council, the finance council, my best youth ministry volunteers. But there was something there meeting their needs. There is another study, which I don't have here, that I could get for you. It's in one of the papers I wrote in grad school. But one of the primary reasons that Catholics leave for Protestant churches is cited to be, I received teaching on the Bible. I started to understand the Bible. And so it's crucial, as we all know, that we get after it. And this is what happens when evangelization, I think, is not taking its primary place. Pope Francis has this great quote, which I deleted from this presentation, but it's relevant right now, that missionary, what is it? You probably know it. Missionary activity is paradigmatic for all the church's activity. All the church's activity. So it brings an urgency in everything. It breathes urgency in everything. It reframes everything according to how I can reach more hearts with an encounter with Christ. So what are we looking at here? A lot of times it's asked, what's new about the new evangelization? I've heard it here, and I understand the question. Disturbingly, I've also heard it from bishops. They don't, oftentimes bishops still don't know what the new evangelization really is. And of course it is new in ardor, it's new in spirit and creativity, it's new in all of those ways, but also what's new is a new attentiveness to the reality that baptized Christians, baptized Catholics, are not always disciples. They have not always experienced an encounter with Jesus. Pope Benedict in Deus Caritas Est, in the first paragraph, right, you know this quote, Christianity is not merely a lofty ideal or ethical choices. It's an encounter with a person. And what Pope John Paul II did in Redemptoris Missio is acknowledge explicitly that we cannot assume that even in countries with ancient Christian roots, we have to acknowledge that entire groups of the baptized have lost a living sense of the faith. Even the weekly Mass attending Catholics who are all-stars, and we saw the statistics, 30% are only coming once a month. Less than that for the weekly, but even among them, we can't assume that they're coming with this living sense of faith. They live a life far removed from Christ and His gospel at times. And I was just digging into this a little bit. This is the Cara study out of Georgetown, 2008, Sacraments Today, I believe it's called. But these are weekly Mass attenders. And the question was asked, is the Catholic faith the most important part of your life? And out of the weekly ones, these are the elites, most faithful Catholics we have, only a third of them, a little more than a third, would say it's the most important part of my life. It's obviously not lining up with the gospel exhortations. These are good people. I don't mean to stand in judgment. These are good people, and I know these people. I worked with these people in a parish But I do know that this is true, that if you ask them this, they would have other priorities, but well, I don't want to get too carried away. Their students would come on retreats and experience radical conversion. I want to give my life to Jesus. I think maybe I'm called to be a priest or a sister, and the parents would say, whoa, don't get too carried away. You know, this is the reality in our pews, and it's a reality we can work with, right? I mean, I'll take a third. And you know, you can work with this, and they're coming weekly. There's some really good impulses behind this. But here's another indicator of what we have in the pews. Weekly people coming to Mass weekly. Helping the poor and needy is a moral obligation, only half. Only half would say. Not even half. Out of the weekly Mass attending Catholics, not even half would say helping the poor and needy is an obligation of my life. It's just an ignorance about the Scriptures. It's an ignorance about what Jesus was all about. And down here also I find this striking. In deciding what is morally acceptable, I look to the Catholic Church teachings and statements made by the Pope and bishops to form my conscience. That's not really a high bar. I mean, you didn't say, I obey all the Church's teachings. This is just, I look to the Church to help form my conscience. And only a third would say yes. Out of the weekly Mass attenders. So we got work to do. I mean, when you're preaching on Sunday, you are preaching to this group. And never mind this group, which is still making up a good part of your churches. You might have noticed the drop-off between those groups. And even in this last slide, you know, the drop-off, the crazy drop-off there. There's a lot of these people in your pews. I want to define that for you, but I don't know that it's been done, and it probably needs a head count to really figure out what the proportion in your pews is between the weekly Mass attenders and the monthly, basically. One more on this. Those who attend weekly, only 13% would say they're very involved in their parish. So even those attending weekly, I take this to mean they kind of come in and go out. You know, they're the ones, and I knew them, and they're good people. I loved their kids, but they're coming in kind of the last minute, and they're leaving as soon as they can. They're out of there, and a lot of the group is like this. Only 13% say they're very involved. Someone involved might be I help with the church festival once a year, or I come to the Lenten soup once a year, something like that. Involved very little, and the majority are down there involved a little or not involved at all. And these are the weekly Mass attenders. So we have work to do. Our preaching is directed. You can see how the missionary mandate needs to be paradigmatic for your preaching. And that's what we want to talk about. So this is an illustration that outlines, using a baseball diamond, what we find in the General Directory for Catechesis, and most explicitly, actually, in the National Directory for Catechesis. Faye has put together some quotes for you that we're not going to run through those quotes right now, but it'll fill this out a little bit. I'm going to walk you through it just, using what's in my head. But you have some meat there to sink your teeth into that'll outline this even more. So what we have in the General and the National Directories is a process of evangelization. You know that these directories sought to take Evangelii Nuntiandi and try to help the church apply it, help the church run with the exhortation from Pope Paul VI. And so the first stage, the first part of this process outlined in the directories is pre-evangelization. And I know you know what that is, but we say they're not even in the game. They're not even in the stadium to play the game. They're not at bat. They're outside the stadium. They don't know anything about baseball, and they think it's boring and stupid, and why would I ever spend $40 to go watch it? They're not interested at all. And so the first task of the church is to win trust and to meet these people and to show them Catholics aren't mean, judgmental hypocrites. Catholics are relevant people, funny people. They're interested in the world. They go to plays. They go to sports. They engage in interesting conversation. They're your neighbors, your workers, your co-workers, your family, and they're trustworthy. And that is the task of pre-evangelization. Whatever we do, we need vital, dynamic, pre-evangelistic activity that maybe the parish is facilitating very intentionally, but we want all the laity in the church engaging in this in their workplaces, winning trust, pre-evangelizing. And once they meet a Catholic they trust, which most people haven't met a Catholic they trust, otherwise more people would be coming to Mass. But once they win a Catholic they trust, they might be in the game. They might be prepared to hear the gospel. And this is what we pray for, we urgently long for, that most people would be in a place where they would come into the stadium, where they would pick up a bat, where they would give it a try, they would stand, I don't know what I'm doing, but man, I saw a good friend of mine try this, he seemed to be joyful and having a good time doing it, I'm going to take a swing. And then we throw them a slow pitch, we make it really easy for them, and they start marching. Praise be to God. And if that retreat is really good, or that small group is really good, or that homily is really good, during this time, this is missionary proclamation, during this time, they will be awakened to the reality, to the living presence, to the love of Jesus that transcends all understanding. They will be awakened to a reality that they maybe believed in from a distance, that maybe they've been acting upon, but now in their heart, in their mind, they're as convinced that Jesus lives as their friend who won them the trust. Now the pieces start falling together and they realize, well, this is why this person was like that. They knew this reality and never knew this. Oftentimes this happens at confession. People go to confession after years. In our small groups, we have one particular chapter that has a follow-up during the week. Try to go to confession this week and think about this passage as you go. And inevitably, in my meetings with students, I have found that that is a key point of conversion for a lot of students. They do try to go to confession. They do think about this passage and the mercy of Jesus as they go to confession. And they have powerful experiences of conversion. And that is, when that happens, this missionary proclamation, the General Catechetical Directory from 1971 had a phrase that I'm so sad the church abandoned because it's beautiful. Evangelizing arouses the beginnings of faith. Arouses. I was bored, but now I'm not bored anymore. It was all kind of glazing over for me. I was falling asleep during Mass, but I'm awake now. This person lives. He's real. He's full of love that I've never known in my life. He's real. This missionary proclamation arouses, wakes up the beginnings of faith, saying you have believers. You don't have disciples yet, but you have believers. You don't have a person who knows how to live out their faith, who even knows how to pray. If you give them a Bible, they'll start in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and they'll get to Numbers and they'll be done. You know, that's what they'll do. They'll start in the beginning, because no one taught them how to read the Bible. It's like Jesus coming, it's like Philip coming along the side of the eunuch. What are you reading? I don't know, help me. You know, this is what we have. We have believers. They have no idea how to live it out, how to grow. They're St. Paul calls them babies. They need milk. They need milk. That's what we have believers. They're not ready to fight about cohabitation or contraception or homosexuality. They're not ready for thick, meaty, controversial things. They need milk. The General Directory for Catechesis says we're focused on the person and mission of Jesus Christ right here. We want them to learn about Him, who they now believe in. He who they have experienced. What is He like? What did He do? How can I pray? How can I speak with Him? How can I read about Him? How can I experience Him in the sacraments? This is what a believer needs. And that stage is called Initiatory Catechesis. In the church, specifically, the main modality for that would be apprenticeship. The church talks all the time about apprenticeship with Initiatory Catechesis. And it makes sense that you all and I have learned certain ways of prayer. We've learned certain prayers during Mass to keep us engaged and awake. We've learned where to start in Scripture. I would take someone to the book of Philippians or Ephesians. I would take someone to the Gospel of John or Matthew, and I would show them my favorite passages. I would show them the reading from today, Matthew 11. Boom, I'd take them right there. Check this out. Come to me, all you who are weary. Look, this is good news. Look at this. And this is how I would pray through this. And I would show them Lectio. In my first meeting with a student on campus, boom, and we do this at parishes too. The first meeting, we got to show you how to pray Lectio Divina. This is awesome. You can do this every day, and you'll never be bored in prayer again. And when we walk them through that, 5 minutes on this, 5 minutes on this, 5 minutes, 20 minutes is gone before you know it. You thought you'd be bored in 20 minutes of prayer? You're going to want more. You're going to want more. But that takes apprenticeship, initiatory catechesis. Focused on the person of Jesus, and specifically, it's so pragmatic. Not disputed questions, the general directory says. Not disputed questions. And not speculative theology at this point. Simple, easy. It says that which is common to the tradition. That which is common. Nobody argues about this. Everybody knows we need the sacraments. How do I receive the sacraments? Where do I go? What do I think about? What's it all about? I need someone to show me. That's what babies need, initiatory catechesis. Primarily through apprenticeship, one-on-one apprenticeship primarily. But this is obviously something we can do in the pulpit. This is obviously something we can preach. You're preaching about the person of Jesus all the time. And these two actually run together in a beautiful way, don't they? Because you're preaching about Jesus, you're giving milk to new believers. You're preaching about Jesus and you're proclaiming who he is, which is evangelizing and arousing faith. These two run together. They're just kind of organically connected. And so a lot of the ministries in your parish would do both of these. You're not just going to, except for maybe a retreat. A retreat, you kind of drop people. And if you don't follow up on them, you're in trouble. You know, they'll skate off eventually. But small groups will do all this. You know, intentional communities do this. Oftentimes a mini-series that runs through this, you know, Father Barron's Catholicism series, I think, seeks to do both of these things. So a lot of times they run together. And so the same with our preaching, I think. But I'm just outlining for you the categories and what they look like so we can talk about them. After initiatory catechesis comes permanent catechesis. And this is the meat. We got the milk. St. Paul wants them to be ready for the meat. I wish you were ready for the meat, but I have to give you milk. Well, this is the meat. These are the disputed questions. These are the moral teachings of the church that would be tough for people to swallow. This is dig deep, self-sacrificing love that might have scared them away at first, but we want them to grow in strong virtue, to be strong in spirit. So that's permanent catechesis, and it'd be more deeper formation in virtue, but also speculative theology. I mean, more about the Trinity, stuff that they might have written off as craziness before. Now that they understand Jesus and they trust the church, you can do a lot. You can do a lot. They'll be like Peter, maybe. You know, I don't know what you're talking about, but you have the words of eternal life. You know, they might be like that. That teaching doesn't make any sense to me, but man, the church has given me so much as it is. How could I ever walk away? I'll stick around. I'll continue to learn about this. Could we meet again to talk about this? They're not just going to take off. And that's the importance of initiatory catechesis. It sets you up for a deeper, persistent, difficult sometimes dialogue with people in formation. All right, that's primarily what I wanted to walk through here as far as stages. Obviously, once you have disciples, then as a parish or a local ministry, we want to equip workers, and we want to send them back out into the world so that they can build trust. You know, we send workers out, so we have more workers than doing pre-evangelization, which means we have more people on base, which means we have more of all of it. So it's a process of formation. It's outlined in the general directory. You don't skip bases. It's really, you know, it doesn't work to skip bases. You can't take someone from here and plunge them into a theology on tap on politics. That doesn't arouse the beginnings of faith. That just starts fights, right? It might seem really great that I got a bunch of people here to come to my mini-series on women's ordination. You know, lots of people were interested, wanted to learn about it, but it's not arousing the beginnings of faith. It's starting arguments and creating division because people aren't ready for it. We pay attention to the pedagogy of the church, and we get there. We get to have those conversations, but they're rich, and they have a baseline of faith and commitment and trust that we can work with. And so that you don't skip bases. You don't leave runners stranded. We don't want to leave people up in discipleship. We want to get them in mission. You know, otherwise they get stale. So the whole thing flows. You score, so to speak, when you get someone back out in the world in mission. That's when you score. Until then, your job's incomplete. If you equip workers and all they're doing is working around the church, they're lay people and all they're doing is leading the choir and Eucharistic ministers, but outside of the church they have no mission, we haven't done our job. We got to get people back into the world and not just create workers that stay in the church. So this is the framework, it's the process outlined in the General Directory, and I would love to hear any thoughts you have about preaching. What kind of insights do you have as you listen to this?